All right, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time today to come on to the podcast. I know that you have a busy schedule with this upcoming conference and everything, so I just want to thank you for coming on here today.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
So for you guys that don't know, Chris, he's the founder of Podfest, which is one of the largest podcast conferences in the world. He's also recently written a book called Start Ugly, and he's got a Facebook group with over 2,400 members. He's been in the scene, influencer scene forever. He's hired Gary Vee as a speaker for his conference back in the day before he was Gary Vee. He's watched so many influencers just grow from the ground up. So he's just a huge resource in the scene. So he's an awesome guest to have on the show. So I feel honored to have you here today.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm glad to be on your show.
So can you give us a quick spiel about what your brand and what you are doing today as far as sharing goes?
Well, at a basic level, what I do is I facilitate communities through live events, and I create facilitated environments for people to collaborate with as little friction as possible, helping create connections that ordinarily would not happen. So creating emotional experiences that you'll remember for the rest of your life. So that's kind of my specialty. And Podfest is the conference that I do, but we also have other conferences that I'm part of, like VidFest, and then I help support She Podcasts. And we have other ones that we're launching. And right now we're in the phase of growing what we call microcons, helping other people launch their brands. And I come from a world of abundance. I believe if you could help other people up the ladder of success, it's a privilege to do so. So it's kind of the state of what I do full time.
That's amazing. So can you share just maybe an unintended consequence that you've had over the past few years? Maybe someone you've impacted in a way you didn't expect to impact?
You know, a long time ago, we started, I had someone at Meetup talk about podcasting, and I took it back to a business group that I was doing. And I remember we did a workshop on podcasting. In that workshop, you know, a lot of times you do workshops, you don't realize what will happen. But that workshop was 7 years ago. In that workshop, 5 of the largest podcasters in their niches grew out of it. We have the top commercial Florida real estate podcast called Invest Florida came out of that. One of the top editing podcasts for editors called All Things Post came out of that. We had another gentleman, we were hosting one of our local meetups for podcasting. Then we created a meetup. And I remember he was our host. He was hosting it because he was working out of college. And he was so inspired by something my wife said in the room, he became a podcaster. So imagine someone's hosting your event. Like they're the person that works at the college. And he started the colon cancer podcast, and that's Lee Silverstein, who has stage 4 cancer. He just started, and he branched out to We Have Cancer. So here's someone, unintended consequence. He's in the room helping us facilitate it because he gave us a room at the college he was working at. And now he's one of the largest voices for people with cancer in the world. Fast forward 6 years later. It's pretty amazing.
And that's from a meetup that you put together, and you got people together to, meet each other and converse?
Yeah, once a month we have the Florida Podcast Association. So it's in my backyard. We hold meetings in Tampa and Orlando. And then we support all the other meetups in the state through our group. And I had one guy recently come in there, and he's like, oh, what did he say? He goes, I'm a naming expert. He's the guy that gets paid to come up with the name for a company. And I'm like, I've heard of those things, but I've never found someone that makes a full-time living. How'd you get started? He goes, actually, this group helped me. I go, how did that happen? He's like, well, a year and a half ago, I came into this group, and someone said, hey, you should go on Fiverr and offer your services. So he goes, I found a guy that was the top guy in the world, and I was helping him, and now he gives me all his overflow. Now this is what I do professionally. So it's these weird things that happen when you bring people together.
Wow. Yeah, and to think that you're impacting these people to start these movements, but then the movements that they create as a result, the massive level of impact that has happened as a result of these meetups and these in-person organized events that you're doing is just amazing.
Yeah, there's something that happens when people come together and it's live, and there's a different energy to it, a different feel. and a lot of great stories come out of it. Especially a lot of us know each other online, but then once a year or once a month, depending on the frequency, we all get together and something special happens when everybody's in the room together.
So what was the beginning like for creating these live events? I know you talked about, starting the podcast meetup and getting people together for that, but is that your entry point, or when were you starting to gather people together and share yourself as a result?
So my first live event is over 10 years ago now, and I was hosting a TV show in Tampa, and I was enjoying it. It was a live TV show, and I sent an email out to everybody listening, watching the show, saying, "Hey, I'd love to get everybody together for an event." And one of our viewers, Mr. Diaz, had an American Legion Hall. He said, "Hey, you could have it at my Legion Hall. It's only $300." I'm like, "Price is right, done." So I set up. This was in June in Florida, and I set up a meeting. 99 people showed up. I didn't know at the time if it was good or bad. I just knew I was trying to get people to buy into this community I wanted to start. The air condition broke the night before, and the Legionnaire smoked cigars the night before. So when I tell you it stunk and it was hot and it was humid, it was probably the worst environment you could have for a meeting. And it was an American Legion Hall. Like, I should have had it at a hotel. But back then I had no idea how to do events. I didn't even know you should have it in a hotel. And 99 people showed up. I pitched them this idea about this community I wanted to start for business people, by business people. And I put out a flyer, and on the flyer, you would enter your credit card information if you wanted to join. When everybody left, I saw most of the papers were empty. And one of my friends were like, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm going to throw it out. No one join. I'll figure something else out." And she's like, No. One out of every 5 of these things are filled out. Take a look. And I started looking, and I was like, "Oh crap, 20 of them are filled out." And some were filled out for VIP, some were filled out normal. I really didn't even know what I was doing at the time. And that started my career in events. And someone told me, he's like, "Why'd you have it at the American Legion?" I'm like, "I don't know if this would work." He's like, "Go have it at a hotel." So that was my first tip. And then, the next month or two, whatever, I had it at a hotel. And then after that, someone's like, "You should have it at a business club, because this is a local business community. You could probably get a better rate. And there's a lot of business people at these business clubs." So then we moved it to a business club. And you learn something. Now I've done over 2,000 events. I still am learning things today that I didn't know 10 years ago. Because now I'm in the convention space. I'm dealing with hotels, the huge, 50, 100,000 square feet of space, dealing with thousands of people instead of, dozens and hundreds. So it's all built. My knowledge has built over that 10-year period of time.
Oh, that's amazing. Taking a step back here, you were the host of this TV show. You sent an email blast out to the audience. You got 99 people to show up. You pitched an idea for a community, and you got 1 out of 5 people to sign up for this community. What was your drive for this? Why were you doing that? Why did you feel inclined to send that email to pull people together? And then why did you have a plan to just keep that community going? Like, what was your driving factor?
In my late 20s, I was really good at business, but I didn't enjoy what I was doing. So I had a period of time where I call it my standing in the silence. I had no kids. I had no dependents. I spent 6 months going for a walk at sunset, asking myself, what did I want to do with my life? And I came out with, life is all about experiences. So how awesome would it be if I had a community of people that I could have experiences with and create experiences on a continual basis? And then I asked myself, well, what are you really good at? I'm really good at connecting people, and I was really good at business. So I said, let me create a community where we connect the right business people together. And I said, I don't like people that are negative. So I only want to deal with positive-minded folks that want to grow personally and professionally. And let's put them into a ecosystem where we could allow for greatness to happen. And that's what we did. We used to do, Jeremy, at the peak, we used to do 150 events a year. I still remember 5 years in, I came home one day because there was a holiday or something. I don't remember what it was. I forgot. It was some kind of holiday. I came home at 5 o'clock, and I see all these people outside walking their dogs and just jogging. And I thought something was wrong. I'm like, what are all these people doing outside? This is so weird. And then I realized it was the first time in my life in that last 5 years that I was home before 9 p.m. because I would do meetings every night at different restaurants. So then I was like, okay, I need to adjust something because I mean, this is good that I learned, but I overdid it. And I realized there was something out of whack. So let me create a little bit of balance. But I loved it. I mean, obviously it was my passion, it was my love.
Yeah, that's crazy. 150 events a year. That's one every other day, essentially. It's
Every night, it was more, but I say 150 because you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But we used to do weekly meetups, and we used to do 4 of them a week. So that right there is 200 if you include the meetups. So I was only including 1 or 2 of the meetups. I was including all of them, and I used to
wow.
facilitate all of them. So when people are like, "You're really good at facilitating," well, I've had a lot of at bats.
Wow, that's amazing. So why was it so important to you to you discovered that life was about these life experiences during your standing in silence moments, but why was it so important to you to build this community and to make everything around these life experiences?
Well, if you ask most people what they want in their life, it's to help other people. It's almost like 99% of the time, someone will be like, "I want to help other people." And a lot of times you don't realize it. Like you might have someone that's working in a plant making rubber bands. And if they're passionate, they're excited because they know those rubber bands will help people. So I was just asking myself, like, how do I want to help people and how can I help people? And how can I fill my life with experiences? And I had a skill for bringing people together and I enjoyed events. So I just married the two. And I'm also really good at programming. As a little kid, I watched television and I would say, man, the programming's really off. They should have this program at this time, this program at that time, and they should switch it around. Don't ask me why, but I just knew I could program better. So that skill set also came in because our education is superior because of that skill set. So all these things came together and I was able to recognize it because I asked myself the question of like, what are you good at? What do you want to spend your time in? So just something I enjoy and I get to do it. Like, think about it. Every day of the week, I get to help people. I probably send 1 or 2 introductions every day, connecting people all over the country so they could help each other. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Sometimes all over the world.
That is really amazing. Congrats, by the way, on just building a lifestyle around something that's so authentic and true to yourself and that you're passionate about.
Well, I never gave up on the dream, so it wasn't easy. So those first 5 years, I had to make payroll for like 60 straight months. At the end of each month, I came up short and I had to figure out ways to make payroll. So I was just committed to the idea and I wasn't willing to let up. And I also had an amazing wife who also supported everything and was a stable rock. So just don't give up. I wanted it bad enough to be where I'm at now. Like people are like, how the heck, what do you do? How do you make money? You're a promoter. And you have to realize, Jeremy, I know you know what I do because you've seen it. But if you're like in a business setting and you tell people I do an event once a year and they're like, you make a living off of that, it's very hard to understand because most events my size are put on by associations or nonprofits. They're not put on by an individual that started it and still is at the helm. Usually a big corporation or someone buys it out eventually. So it's just a very unique thing to be a full-time promoter.
Yeah, for sure. And to have the drive to push through all those barriers that you had to overcome. I mean, for 5 years, you had the struggle of pursuing this passion. Like you really had to have a powerful why to push through all that. And it sounds like you're very clear on why you're doing it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I used to go to my UPS mailing place, and I used to go get the mail, and I'd be praying for checks to be in the mail, and all that would be in there was bills. So then I was like, man, how do I make do? And I would figure it out. And I would say to myself, one day, I'm going to come to this box and it's going to be full of checks. And I remember like the 5-year mark, one day I got in there and there was like 10 checks and I'm like, look at this. I had more checks than I had bills. And that was the turning point. It was really maybe because I've had to be so scrappy for so long, even though now I do well, I value things very differently because I had to work so hard for them, if that makes sense. So yeah. I don't really spend money frivolously, and I'm very I have to really think of the value because I also have 2 daughters. So I'm definitely a value buyer, and I love my podcasting T-shirts. So I'm either wearing a Podfest shirt or one of my sponsors. I don't really have to dress up. I do have some really nice tailored clothes for when I do these business meetings that I go out and speak. So my book, Start Ugly, that's right over my shoulder. And my speaking is what I do throughout the year. Yeah, thank you, brother. Is what I do throughout the year. So that was another blessing. That was like, I want to create something that millions of people will read. And a lot of people tell you, "Oh, don't be so dumb. That's not possible. Only the average author sells 20 books, whatever it is." I mean, I heard all of it. I was like, well, why does your reality have to be my reality? I just didn't accept it. My reality was I'm smart enough. I've had enough life experiences. I'm going to create something that could inspire and help as many people as I can. And then it's up to me to put it out there. And literally yesterday, I got an order of my 1,000 books came in because I sold all my other physical copies and I'm selling online. And we're
Wow.
always ranking in the top 200. At Podfest, I have a feeling we'll hit top 10.
Nice, very cool. I know you just recently launched that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I really launched it in October of last year. So the only reason I'm sharing it is I'm proud of myself, but I just want to make sure people understand, like, don't accept someone else's reality because it doesn't have to be yours.
That's great advice. So let's talk about a barrier that you had to overcome during the early parts of your journey. You wanted to build this lifestyle of helping people and inspiring people through communities and live events, and it took a 5-year struggle to do that. Did you have any barriers that you had to overcome? And if so, like, maybe what's a couple of them or one of them, and how did you overcome it?
Well, a very simple one was running out of money. We knew as I was doing this business, we would run out of money. And luckily for us, we had an angel investor that gave us a small amount of money at 7% interest, not because they wanted to make money off of us, but because they wanted to help us. And I was very proud that we were able to pay that investor back with the interest and send a nice thank you. They've since passed away, but that person helped me tremendously because it was a small bridge loan to bridge the growth of the company to profitability. Because unfortunately, when you're building a community, it's not like most businesses take 2 to 3 years, you break even, whatever. There's all kinds of rules. For community, you got to win the respect of people, and you're competing with chambers that have been around 100 years if it's a local community. So it was extremely difficult to build that reputation. But then once that reputation was built, we were off to the races. And without that bridge loan, I wouldn't be where I am today. That and my wife, she was an amazing support.
That's awesome, and yeah, that's very fortunate that that person was there to be willing to help you through that time. So let's shift gears to more of today because we talked about your starting point. So how has your why changed for where you are today? Obviously, you're not trying to just pay your next bills. So why are you doing what you're doing now today?
Well, my why has always been the same, and it's to help people achieve their greatest potential, their personal best, by creating a facilitated environment that allows for that. So when you see people like Jamie Langenauer, who came as part of one of our first ever Pay It Forward recipients, and now she's growing a team and she's scrimped and saved. And just like me, she spent years building her company, and now she has people she's employing. And she was a single mother, not complaining, looking for a future to live into. That gives me, I cannot tell you how much. I'm one of those people that watches like America's Got Talent, and I'll tear up when I see someone achieve greatness. So it makes me very happy to see other people reach their full potential. So my job is to facilitate an environment where people could achieve their goals through, right now, on-demand content, audio and video, through my conference. And the conference, by the way, is a physical thing, but it's also the community lives on through virtual platforms, and we will have printed newsletters that will go out to the attendees. So you're going to see a lot of interaction throughout the year with all our conference goers, and then we'll organize meetups for people to get together. It's going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. And a lot of people I've talked to, their whys can oftentimes drastically change. But I think for you, you put so much thought starting out, and you were so focused in the beginning that your why, if anything, has grown to make more impact and more of everything, but not necessarily changed as much.
Yeah, my momentum started in my late 20s once I set my course, and I haven't really veered off of that. I mean, you always have whatever bumps in the road, but I'm very fortunate that a lot of those connections that I made back then are now. Here's a cool story. You'll appreciate this. So one of the policies when we ran our original community locally was if anyone needed help, we take all calls. So we would take all hey, I need your time. Now, if it was a salesperson trying to sell you, we wouldn't necessarily take that all the time because, oh, yeah, I got a great product. Let me sell it to you. But there's people like, hey, I was told you could help. You have a community, blah, blah, blah. So one gentleman was writing a book and he needed help getting his book out there. He was in San Diego. I said to him, listen, man, we have a community. I want to help you. If you get your book completed, let me know. We'll bring you in. You'll fly in on your own time, but we'll put you in front of an audience so you could get your message out. The only reason was he had a lot of passion. He was willing to come in from the West Coast. I'm like, you know what? If I could help give him a start, why not? Now that project got tabled for him, but fast forward like 10 years later, I'm at Traffic and Conversion, which is a conference in San Diego. And I'm visiting the booths and I'm saying hello. And this guy goes, I know who you are. And I've never met him. So I go, I think you got the wrong person. He goes, no. You might remember me. He goes, I'm so-and-so. I had written a book and I reached out to you and you were the only one that would take my call. And you're the only one that was willing to help me. And he started having tears in his eyes. And he's like, if you ever need anything, he was working in some print company that had a exhibitor booth. He goes, I just want to tell you how much that meant to me. Thank you for believing in me. You were the only one. And it's like these little impacts that you don't realize. To me, it was just a call, seeing how it could help someone. To him, it meant the world because no one else would be willing to help him. So it's I always tell people, like, if you can help someone and it doesn't take a lot of time out of your day, it's a small amount of time and it's a good person that needs a break, why not? Too many people, they don't think of how they say, oh, I can't do that. You know what I mean, Jeremy?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
I had this is a great story. It's triggering a story. I don't really share this one publicly, only because it doesn't fall into the business thing. But I was in my bank a long time ago, and I was working on getting a loan. I was investing in real estate and all this stuff. And this lady in Spanish comes in frantically trying to get access to her account. And the manager in the back of the place, I was sitting down with the manager, but the other assistant manager goes, ma'am, if you don't have your account number, I can't help you, really quickly. So I get up from where I am. I look the lady in the eyes and I said to her, numero de social security. And she starts blurting out the numbers. And, everybody knows Spanish numbers, right? So I'm writing it down. And I look at the manager. They're all laughing, thinking I was trying to make a joke or something because it was so odd. I said, can you find her account number through her social security number? He goes, yeah. I go, okay, here you go. And then this lady starts crying and starts speaking to me in Spanish. I don't know Spanish, but I know, like, in Spanish, number is numero. And social security, everybody knows what that is. And I've been there where someone doesn't want to help you. I can't tell you, the lady was like putting blessings over me. And I just told her, my parents are from Greece. I go, Griego, which is Greek in Spanish. But sometimes those little moments mean the world to another human being. And a lot of times, I don't know why, but we always say, oh, we can't help that person. But in that moment, I can't tell you how good that felt, because my mom came from another country. Her English is great now, but I could imagine if she was frantically trying to get money to help someone and she was in a panic, I would want someone helping my mom, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, those are two powerful stories you just shared. And I've heard you share endless amounts of stories just as equally impressive and amazing. It sounds, you've definitely helped so many people in so many ways. And it's awesome that you're just, doing that through life in general. And that's awesome.
And we all have the same, I always tell people, a friend of mine recently was sick, and whenever, if I can make it into a hospital, visit a friend, I'll go visit them. And a lot of people don't go after visiting hours. That's when I like going, because they're usually alone and they're scared. So I'll just go through be like, hey, this is my brother. I got to go see him. So they let you in. And a lot of people find excuses why not to visit. But I noticed, I don't know if anyone that visits anyone in a hospital, this is a common problem. And I've been in a lot of hospital rooms. People usually don't have a long enough extension cord for their phone. So then they're in their hospital bed and they can barely reach their phone because it's usually on that chair that reclines right next to their bed. So the next day I came in and I had a longer extension cord that I have. And he's about to reach over for his phone. I said, I got you. And I took my longer extension cord, took his shorter one. I go, here you go. And you could see that meant the world to him, because it's a little thing, because he's going to be there for 3-4 days. Now he could have his phone right in his lap so he could talk to his wife or his kid. And little things like that mean the world to people. And he said, oh, thank you so much. And I said, thank you. I look at it as a privilege when you could help your friends when they need you most. So it's a lot of people don't realize it's not a chore, it's a privilege.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've, on top of the fact that we've got a comment that came in. That was sweet.
Thank you, Sam.
um, so you've helped so many people on so many levels, and you've helped so many people who now you're sort of in this giving people a voice realm with the podcasting thing. Do you mind sharing a couple stories of how, like, people you've seen, like doors that have opened, or how they've changed as a result of them sharing and becoming more vulnerable and overcoming their barriers?
Yeah, at the second ever Podfest, we had the city planner of the city of Tampa walk through our doors, and he knew that in 3 or 4 years he was going to retire. So he was planning on creating some kind of exit strategy so he had something to live into when he was retired. And he said to us, I'm thinking of creating a show for boomers or a show about drones. Everybody in the room said, do the drones, screw the boomers. And not like screw the boomers, just the boomer concept will be good, but it won't go anywhere.
Right.
So he took us up on it, and he created the drone radio show. And he was really conscious because he stammered. Okay. So what he would do is he would literally delete his questions and re-record them after he did an interview. So you want to talk about how much time he put into it. He created the drone radio show. He no longer re-records his questions. He's now one of the top experts in the world. He's about to retire, and he has a full-time thing to step into called the Drone Radio Show. He interviews people like Uber, talking about how they're going to use drone, flight drone cars to move people. He interviews people from Intel. He's known as one of the top 4 or 5 influencers in the world, and he literally walked through our doors just looking for an idea. We've launched 5 of the largest real estate podcasts in the world out of our doors. We've launched, we have a friend that does Medicare. You'll appreciate this. So my good friend Diane Daniels, she's a Medicare expert, and she got tired of people in insurance steering people to the policies that they were selling. And she's like, the elderly just need the help. So she created Medicare Nation. What's interesting is she became the top expert in the world for Medicare, and now she gets paid for the advice she used to give away for free. So people are willing to pay her for her hour of time just to explain things. Now, here's how it comes full circle. My parents moved to Florida, and my dad needed help with Medicare. So who do I call? I called Diane. So Diane said, I'm going to drive up and help your parents. She spent an entire day, and I said, Diane, how can I help you? She goes, you've already helped me. I'm just paying it forward. She spent a full day with my parents to help my dad get his Medicare. I can't tell you how grateful I felt in that moment. They had such an amazing friend that did that for me and my family. It made things a lot easier.
Wow. That's amazing. And actually, when you talked about the drone guy, I have a similar story. In my first 3 episodes, I literally just asked a question, got the answers, and I re-recorded myself in post-editing for asking all the questions I asked. And then,
now you're doing great. I mean, you're a natural. Yeah. It's funny, you look back on it, you're like, wow, look at how far you've come. So podcasting builds a lot of skills that people need, and confidence is a big one. And you and Randy have that, where it was able to build your not only confidence but your competency. You feel more competent in how to do this. And I've done a lot of podcast interviews, and you've been very smooth the whole time you've been interacting with me. And you're only going to get better. So that's the great thing about this whole thing.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, actually, and also my business, I've got a car dealership. I import cars from Japan, and I built a social following there. And I put my face on my Instagram there for the first time.
Congratulations. That's
thank
big.
you. Like last week, and that video got like 8,000 views in like 2 days.
Wow. They were starving to see you. They want to see, who is this guy? That's great. That tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, so it's been a journey for sure. And now I'm doing live streams. So this is like my 4th live stream now. So I've had people challenge me saying, once I hit 30, I've got to live stream interviews. And so I've been just iteratively trying to grow through the process.
Congrats, Jeremy. That's huge.
Thank you. Thanks. So I know that you don't have a podcast yourself. You sort of build these communities like the Podfest, and you charge fees for people to come in. So you've got sort of a clear business model for how you're making income doing what you're doing.
I do have the kid-friendly network, but someone else, I own it, but I pay someone to produce the content. So, I have a podcast network. It's just I don't do any of the work.
Right. Okay. So Do you mind diving into, it doesn't have to be about you specifically, but how people who have podcasts or have platforms, like where they're making their income from, like sources of where it comes from?
Okay, so you have people that are like, you have a business, right? So you have people that, there's two kinds of people. You have your hobbyists or the people that want to monetize their podcast. I want to be very clear. If you're a hobbyist and you're enjoying what you're doing, keep doing it. Like that's don't ever stop because someone else makes you feel guilty because you're not monetizing. But for the people that want to monetize it, you have a couple different tracks. You have podcasts that are consumed by the masses, so they're more pop culture, more popular type podcasts. And when they hit 5,000 downloads or more, they could almost get ad representation to represent them and put ads on their thing, just like radio used to have an ad in front of it. And you have three kinds of ads: pre-roll, that's before the show starts; mid-roll in the middle of the show; and post-roll at the end. Post-roll is the cheapest. If your show's really short, you usually just have pre-roll, depending like how many minutes it is. But the going rates are anywhere from $20 to $40 per thousand. So let's just say, for argument's sake, you have 4 shows a month, so that's weekly, and you're getting 40,000 downloads. Let's say on average you'll probably make $30 per thousand. So that's what's 40. That's like $1,200. Your agent is going to take 20 to 30% of that. So you'll be left with about 900 clear. So that's more of a traditional model. Then you have people like a lot of the people we deal with. They're business owners and they're using it as an avenue for consulting, selling their products. So they don't even want ads because they are the ad, and they're pushing it through their back end. So if you're like a speaker, consultant, coach, or someone that has products and services through the internet, usually you'll use your own podcast to do that. And then you have people that, I mean, they've monetized all kind. Like a good case study for everyone listening to this is the Horse Radio Network. So Glenn the Geek has monetized it like 5 ways to Sunday. So he has monthly sponsors, like almost like gold, silver, like, levels. Then he has like segment sponsors, but remember, he has like 18 shows across his network. So he has a lot of opportunities. So he's a conglomerate. So there's, those are some of the ways. Maybe if you're a leadership author, you want to get like more speaking gigs, booking, but those are the ways. Affiliate relationships. Maybe your show is just recommending other products through Amazon. Like we've seen people make a full-time living off of affiliate relationships, and they're not really selling anything. They're just recommending what they believe in. So those are a few ways.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've been getting more. I didn't used to ask questions related to finances, and I've had people request that I do.
Yeah, so. It's the number one most asked question when it comes to podcasting. I'll tell you the 3 questions. How long should my podcast be? How often should I podcast? Obviously, what mic to use. And then how do I make money is like always how do you make money with it? How do you make money? And I have Story Jam Theater, which is a hobby podcast I used to do years ago. I have people share stories. We put it up there. I didn't want to make money with it. I just want to put some stories out there to help people. So like, it doesn't always have to be a money-making endeavor. It could be an art form that you just enjoy doing.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Great advice. And thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And Jeremy, just so you know, I'm really good at interviewing people, but I don't have the fire in the belly right now because there's so many great interviewers that I think are servicing the marketplace. I look at my time and energy, kind of like you said, I'm really skilled at creating these live events. So that's where I'm focusing my time and energy. But anyone listening to this, just evaluate your skill sets and your talents. But I do a lot of podcast interviews, so I really enjoy being on them. And then we have the Kid Friendly Network, which literally is a network that we created for children. And I have a producer that creates all the content. And then we've been doing it now for about 2.5 years.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think that what you're doing is amazing. You've helped create so many of the top leaders especially in the podcasting niche that are out there, and just the impact that you've had as a result of impacting these big people is just amazing. And just try to think of the magnitude of that is just like almost impossible to think about.
Well, I do enjoy the fact that I get to influence the influencer, and that's pretty cool. So it's a 10x on the 10x. So it's cool to see that magnified. But I'm in for the long haul, dude. I work every day.
Yeah.
We do have really great vacations. We get a lot of time off when it comes to family time, but I work really hard. So a lot of people don't see that. You saw me in Atlanta. Like I flew up to Atlanta I had a gig
For a
in
day.
St. Pete in the morning. Then I drove to the airport, went up to Atlanta for the day, then back that night, and I missed my flight, so I had to
Oh
stay at a
no.
local hotel, and then came back down. 2 days ago, I was in Biscayne Bay. I live in Tampa, so I drove down to Biscayne Bay, spoke. Then I drove up to Orlando, which is 4 or 5 hours north, spoke there to run our Florida podcast, and then I headed home that night. And then the next day, whatever, over again. I have 10 more speaking gigs till Podfest, promoting Podfest.
Wow. So what's your future look like then? Because your why's been very consistent through all this. But what are you excited about as far as the future goes with what you're doing?
Well, if I'm strategically looking at my own growth and I step outside what I see, I'm going to be getting a lot more corporate paid speaking gigs. I'll take the ones that I want to take if they add value to my live events. And my goal is to sell 1 million copies of Start Ugly. So I'm already on my first 1,000. I'm getting to my second 1,000, and that's starting to develop. Like I had a lady recently reach out to me, say, "Hey, I'd like to buy 130 books for my retreat." So
Awesome.
that's happening. And then my live events, they'll be on a quarterly cycle. I'll have 4 a year, and I'll grow them. And then what I'm going to do actively is incubate as many other live events for other influencers as I can, to help them help as many people as they can. So this year we're doing Sports PodCon, we're doing Podcast Editor Con, Audio Drama Con, Military Creator Con, Speaker Pitch Labs, Linked Up for Women, on and on. There's like a bunch I probably missed. Next year it's only going to be more. It's going to be like double the size. So this year we're starting ugly. We're figuring it out. We're realizing there's a lot of kinks in the systems, but we'll fix it next year. But if I didn't start ugly this year, I'd be a year behind, if that makes sense. So now we'll have, we also have Cinema Vos, International Voiceover Con, for Neil Gilarte, my buddy. So these events that I'm incubating this year will only be like 10 times the size next year. So they'll help Podfest grow. Eventually, the events will be too big for Podfest. So I'll be more than happy to consult and help those people get started on their own. They won't need me. And I'm okay with that. Like most people are like, aren't you afraid they'll outgrow you? I go, I hope they'll outgrow me. I want them to be successful. That's the whole point. We'll find someone else to help. There was a famous college coach, Lou Holtz, and he was always known for having the best assistant coaches in all of college. And he used to be the coach of Notre Dame. And they asked him, why do you always let your assistant coaches go? He goes, the way I look at it, I'm here to help them so they could then be head coaches. And then all the best assistant coaches in the world want to come work for me because they know I'll help them up the ladder of success. So he always had the best staff with this method of abundance, where you have other coaches, don't want to let their guys go. Well, now you're holding someone back that would have gone anyway. So it doesn't create a good energy, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, the world needs more people like you. Let's just put it that way.
Well, I grew up in New York, and trust me, I know what the world is like. As far as dog eat dog. Moving to Florida was a breath of fresh air. And I think, Jeremy, people like yourself, myself, the more we could help people around us, it'll just spread that philosophy. And I do love that millennials think that way more than the older generations. But I think that mindset is bleeding through all generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So I'd like to dive a little bit into some tips and tricks for some people. So if you were to meet someone on the street who wants to start a podcast or has just started one and is looking to, just ramp it up more, what would be some of the biggest advice that you can give to this person?
Well, make sure the show is good. And how do you know that? You have to look at your listener numbers, and you have to ask yourself critically, what am I trying to serve? What am I trying to do? Make sure you have the right name. A lot of people will name their shows something that's not searchable. If you want to get a head start, look at what names are already out there on iTunes. Hit the related search and see if there's any terms. Like if you're a real estate podcast, I would highly recommend you put real estate in your name somewhere. So that's really, I know that sounds very basic, but that's probably one of the biggest things I see. And then go study formats. What I mean by that is my wife started the Women's Meditation Network. There was a lot of meditation niches at the time. Now there's like 10 times more. But she realized that most of these meditations did not state the intention of what they were about to do through the guided meditation. So her format is, hey, beautiful, today the intention is to tell you that you're an amazing mom. And then the guided meditation starts, but I know what it's about. I know that sounds very basic, but that propelled my wife to have one of the top podcasts in the world. Sometimes it's a format tweak that you could find. John Lee Dumas is a format tweak. When that guy created EO on Fire, if anyone doesn't know the case study, all he did was create a daily podcast. He was the first in the world to do that for business. Well, that gave him all these listeners that wanted something daily. After that format, people tried, but they were not as successful as he was. So it's all about tweaking your formats and seeing what opportunities. And then you could buy ads. If you have a budget, you could go on Overcast. You could buy ads to get subscribers. Spotify, you could buy ads on. A lot of people don't know that. They're as cheap as $250 per session to buy your ads. And then you could advertise and build up subscribers. But I'd make sure first you have a show that you're proud of, that is really well produced, and then start putting ads, because that'll be the fuel that'll help you grow your base.
Awesome. That's huge advice. Thank you so much. So let's take it a little bit further. And let's say you meet an established podcaster, someone that has been in the industry for years. What are some secret sauces or tips and tricks that an established person can take and run with that can help them take a step to the next level?
So established person should be going to places like Podfest to meet their peers. And I know it sounds like a plug, but I really mean this. And you know this because you've been at these conferences. You wind up meeting other people that are in the same kind of growth phase that you're in. And if it's a niche that's similar, it'd be great to have each other on each other's show, because that's one of the fastest ways you could grow your show. Or you could use a tool like AdvertiseCast, where you could advertise on shows like yours, which will help you. I think that would be it. That and SEO. A lot of established shows don't do SEO. So I would look at your website and SEO your website for the traffic looking for the audio. So that way you could grow your audio through search engine optimization on your website. So my wife does that with Meditation for Women. She had a good friend of ours, Jorgen Berkelsen, who specializes in this, helped her figure out how to find traffic that's already out there to bring them into her listening fold. Yeah, writing articles helps too.
All right. Yeah, that's great advice. And I definitely can vouch for going to Podfest and events.
Well, whatever conference. Yeah, you just want to go to events.
Live events.
It just happens Podfest is one of the top in the world, where you're going to meet pretty much whatever niche you're in. Like we have a guy, his show is putting people to sleep. Well, we have other people that are in that niche, a meditation and sleep. So it's just, we have so many people, you'll meet your niche for the most part.
Right. So a lot of our listeners, they have this like hidden wisdom and knowledge because it's not being shared with the world, especially at a larger level. So like a lot of things that you're sharing today are helping them feel more inspired to share. But before I open the floor for you to pitch some of your stuff, do you have any last words for our listeners here today?
Yeah, I'll share it in a story format. I was up in Baltimore speaking, and at the time I was like, let me see what I can do consulting wise. So I created a consulting package, and it was a test. And I picked up like half a dozen clients, and I was able to create some really cool things. We created the daily Bible verse for a preacher. We created Pilot Sebastiano, which is a Gulfstream pilot. That was a YouTube channel, all to quite success based on doing the right research. But one of the stories was a lady that wanted to do a real estate podcast, and I said to her, what do you do for a living? She goes, I do compliance for banks, like AML compliance. I go, what's AML? She goes, anti-money laundering. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. I go, tell me a little bit about that. She tells me all these amazing cases. And I said, do you love your job? She goes, yeah, I really do. She goes, I go to all these conferences. I know all my associations. I go, why don't you do a podcast in that niche? She goes, you think people listen to me? I go, yeah, of course. And it goes to what you just said. She had specialized knowledge. She loved it, but she didn't think anyone in her niche would listen to her because she knew all these other experts. And I said, her name was Devreen. I said, Devreen, you have a voice that's unique, and we should put it out there. So we created the Compliance Times, a podcast about anti-money laundering, one case at a time. And our first episode was about the Panama Papers. That's a funny case study. It's literally a law firm in Panama that did not update their WordPress plugin for like 5 years. That's how they were able to get millions of files. They didn't update their plugin. So they got all this sensitive information, and all these Europeans and prime ministers and dictators were funneling in hundreds upon billions of dollars. We put the show out there, and she had over 100 people listen. She's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." And I said, "You see, there's a whole group of people. I want to hear your voice." So at the time, though, she didn't know if she was worthy of having her voice out there. And I found an episode on School of Podcasting where Dave Jackson interviewed another friend, Monica Rivera, who talked about imposter syndrome and making it through, and that inspired her to get started. Nice. So I would just tell anybody, everybody hates their voice. No one thinks that they sound good on audio. Just get started. My philosophy is start ugly and figure it out as you go. As long as you're willing to perfectly execute along the way, you're okay. But if you just start ugly and stay ugly, that's not going to help you. You want to start ugly and then perfectly execute and tweak as you go. And that's the secret sauce.
Awesome. Huge advice. Awesome story. Actually, Dave Jackson was a previous guest here on the
He's awesome
podcast. Yeah, he is. He audited my show when I came to Podfest. I actually found him, and he did a show audit, which is pretty cool. Awesome. So I look forward to doing that again with him, maybe after I get the live stream a little more.
Well, and that's a great resource for anyone listening to the show. There's someone that's a professional that'll audit your show and give you feedback.
Yeah, it was very useful. All right. Well, I'd like to end the podcast by giving you an opportunity to talk more about your brand, your social accounts, your conferences, your meetups, your book, anything else you'd like to talk about. And just keep in mind that I'll put links to all those things in the show notes of the episode.
Honestly, I want to just end with a story. Everybody already knows what I do. You could go to podfestexpo.com, and my book is Start Ugly. It's on Amazon. But the story I want to end with for you and your audience is one of my meetups was held at the Village Inn, and there was this old timer named Jerry who would hang out, and he was like 70 years old, so I didn't know what he was looking to do. And he said, "Chris, can I talk to you after one of these meetings?" And I said, "Sure." I would talk to everybody that was new, and Jerry would come every month, and I kind of knew him, but he never sat down and talked with me. He goes, "I got a problem." I go, "What's that?" He goes, "I need your help. I have $1 million, and I don't know what to do with it." And I said, jokingly, I said, "Well, I could help you with that, And I said, "Let's meet up next week and we'll talk." So the next week we met up and we talked. And basically it turned out that Jerry's wife had passed away. He had this money left, and he just had time to pass. And he enjoyed coming to my meetups because they made him feel at home. He felt like he had friends that he could be with. And he bought an iPad. This was back in the day when they came out, and I'm like, "Jerry, show everybody your iPad." It was really cool. And he went on a trip to Italy with his iPad, and he took all these amazing pictures. Fast forward a couple of years, he's like, "Chris, I really love you and Katie. I'd love to invite you guys out to dinner. You remind me of me and my wife." So we go to his apartment, and Katie, like any person's looking at the pictures, "Jerry, what's this? What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, that was the last vacation I took with my wife." And there were pictures of Italy, and I was like, he just shared this trip he just went on by himself of Italy. And I said, "Jerry, didn't you just go on a trip similar?" He goes, "Well, I miss my wife so much. I went back on the same trip we went together by myself, and I took pictures and sat in every bench that we sat in together to remember her." At that point, I go in the bathroom and I start crying because I was like, oof, it hit me hard. Like the love this man had for his wife. I don't know too many people that love their wives like that, their spouses. So we went out to dinner. We had a great time. And, I would touch base with Jerry. "How you doing?" And he also told us that he had this one granddaughter that was a nurse, and she always checked in with him. She'd visit him. She loved him tremendously. So one day, this is 10 years later, Jerry passes right before his 80th birthday. His granddaughter puts up this beautiful message of how much she loved her grandfather, and he would always tell me she's the one that loves him, would take care of him, watch out for him. And I sent her a message. I go, "Hey, I just want to let you know, your grandfather always told me how much you meant to him and how much, he loved you." And she goes, "I'm so glad you reached out to me." She said, "My grandfather left 25 numbers to contact if he ever passed away, and you were one of them, and I didn't have your updated number." To me, that in a nutshell is life. Like, we keep busy doing stuff, but he and I shared some time together, and he was a good friend, and he trusted me so much that I was one of the 25 people he left a contact should he pass. So I think that's the meaning of life. All the other stuff is busy work. You're selling your cars, I'm doing my podcasting. We're all just helping each other, but being kind to one another and making sure that you're having a good time and doing good things, I think is part of the what makes life special. So I'll leave you on that note.
Wow, that's powerful.
I don't share it a lot because I get too teary-eyed because I miss Jerry. So I've shared it once or twice, and I don't think I'll share it too many more times because it's I get choked up thinking about Jerry and putting me as one of the last contacts in case anything happened to him.
Well, thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. That was powerful. Well, Chris, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and being vulnerable and sharing your why and sharing so much value with us today. I know we're a little bit later than we said we'd get to, but before I let you go, I like to ask for feedback from my guests because I am trying to self-develop and learn and become better myself. So do you have any maybe last words for me as a host?
You're getting more comfortable in your questions. And I know you have them written down or you're looking at them, I'm assuming. Just allow yourself to trust yourself and go into the flow and not have to look at your questions and allow it to flow out of you. You have it. What happens is your mind is like, make sure you ask the right question. Don't worry about that. You're a good conversationalist. You've built up a really good talent here. Just know what questions you're going to ask and go into it. So an attorney told me a long time ago, because I used to do that. I used to read the questions I had written, but you definitely did the right flow of your questions. But he said to me, Chris, great attorneys, when they put someone on the stand, they ask a question. And if that question opens up a door, the attorney will go through that door. And then that door will open up 2 more doors. The key is never to go off track and bring it back to the door you want to go into, but allowing that flow to go where you need it to go. So I think you're on your way, Jeremy. I'm really proud of you. Thank you for having me on your show. Excited to hang out with you. Whenever you're in Tampa after Podfest, I'll have time to hang out with you personally. Right now, it's tough.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being so vulnerable and sharing these stories is amazing. So I just want to thank you again for coming on here and sharing with us today.
All right, brother. Be good. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye now.
Bye.